But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
This is HBR News number 190. Case against Harvey Weinstein could be dismissed. With Mike S., Hannah W., and me, the Doge in charge, Brian Martinez. Hello, everybody, and welcome to HBR News. Today's panel consists of, as I just said, Hannah, Dr. Random McCam, and myself. Mike J is, he's MIA. We don't know where he is. So hopefully, he's not dead in a gutter someplace. And will be able to join us a little bit later. We have a great show lined up for you guys today, so please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as in the comments section. On this week's HBR News Show, we're going to be talking about the taxing of video games, adult video games that is, disarming those who have been accused of domestic violence, and some Harvey Weinstein updates as well as some other stuff. So stick around, it's going to be a good time. And feel free to join us afterwards for the patron-only after show. And, you have to become a patron to do that, but it's totally worth it, guys. Here's what we're going to be talking about. I have this article from medium.com entitled, What We Learned About Diversity and Inclusion in the Current Year Plus 3, I think we're on? Yeah. 2018 by Carolina Espinal. And so it should be a really interesting medium blog. I guess Medium is like a blogging site, but we would call it an article because there really isn't that much difference between that and something you might find on Slate. If you want to be a part of that, you have to become a patron, but don't go to Patreon. If you feel weird about it, just go to Feed the Badger. We're trying to drive people to Feed the Badger. I really like the work that I do with Honey Badger Radio. I want to keep doing it. I want to keep bringing you guys content, and I need, we need your help to do that. And I know that there are people who feel really uneasy about Patreon, and I understand that. And I know that there are those who don't trust the alternatives. We don't. I mean, we've already seen what happened to Maker Support as well as what happened to Subscribestar, and so it seems the safest route would be to just go directly to us if at all possible. So to do that, go to feedthebadger.com. Go to Feed the Badger and support us there. Like I said, I've been doing this for a few years now. I actually really enjoy doing this stuff, and I think you guys want to continue to support us. So to do so, go to feedthebadger.com. And I believe we have systems set up for, monthly payments, and essentially we're setting it up. It should be set up very similar to how Patreon does it, and we'll treat you just like a patron, if not better. So there you go. That's your option.
Alison predicted this whole fucking purge. She predicted it years ago. That's why she's secured all of these, platforms that aren't connected to any of that shit.
Yeah.
It's very handy having a neurotic little badger like that around.
It's true. So to do that, join us in the after show. Go to Feed the Badger, join us there, and become. I mean, I guess we could call you patrons, but maybe we should just call you guys Badgers. So you can become a Badger by joining the Badgers at Feed the Badger, feedthebadger.com. Anyway, that is it for that. And also, if you don't want to wake up one morning and find yourself unable to find our content because YouTube finally dropped the axe on our channels, go to badgerfeed.com. Badgerfeed, not Feed the Badger. It's different. That's where you'll find, I believe, all of the content that we make in one place that's convenient for you. So, with that out of the way, we're going to go into the stories. Once again, thanks, guys, for coming on. All right, let's do this thing. So... It's a little awkward without Mike J around. He normally helps me pace everything, and I feel weird. But okay. So here's our first story. This one is brought to us by Stapler. So thank you for that. We have another update on the Harvey Weinstein case, or several cases. Last time we covered it, the case was looking shaky because of the actions of a detective, Nicholas DeGaudio. Remember, we talked about this a few shows back. DeGaudio had encouraged one of the Weinstein accusers to delete some personal data off of her phone before she turned them over to police. And when he interviewed one of Weinstein's accusers, Lucia Evans, as well as one of her friends who ended up describing the encounter very differently, he told the friend that, quote, going forward, less is more, and that she had no obligation to cooperate with law enforcement. DeGaudio gave this advice without informing her of the key differences in her story versus Evans' version of that story. Weinstein's defense lawyer, Benjamin Brothman, argued that these mistakes made by DeGaudio stain the entire case against Weinstein. He also points out that the accusers continued to text and email with Weinstein long after the alleged assault, and this indicates the sexual encounters were consensual. Surprise, surprise. According to The Hollywood Reporter, quote, Braffman has told plaintiff's counsel he intended to unleash these emails in the media to sway the court of public opinion, end quote. According to NPR, women's rights advocates say it's not unusual for victims to continue to communicate with attackers that they know. But Weinstein's accusers want to ban him from disclosing these texts and emails to the media through a protective order. Weinstein's attorneys responded to The Hollywood Reporter the following, quote, the seeking of this protective order comes as no surprise. The plaintiffs in the Geis case know that it's only a matter of time until the bankruptcy court releases Harvey Weinstein's emails to the public. There is no privileged or confidential information contained in the emails, and in fact, they demonstrate a drastically different tale from what the plaintiffs have alleged in the media and in their legal complaint. Ironically, they are trying to silence Mr. Weinstein and doing all they can to prevent the truth from coming out. This strategy will not bode well, as they are going behind the bankruptcy court's back, which has sole jurisdiction over these emails, and the plaintiffs know it. To claim sexual assault and then take such measures to prevent the truth from being heard speaks volumes of their motives, end quote. Brothman says to NPR, this is not about hashtag MeToo being bad, but when you have a hashtag MeToo movement that pressures public officials to take certain action when perhaps it's not warranted, then it gets to be very, very scary. And I think that's what's happened here, end quote. A judge in New York will hear arguments about whether this case can go forward on Thursday, worth tuning in for those interested in the Weinstein case and the hashtag MeToo movement. In addition, depending on what they say, Lindsay and I will probably follow up with a breaking on this story. Mike, go ahead.
There's a lot of people who are in favor of the Me Too movement. People you would never expect. People who would never call themselves feminists and would probably even say they hate feminism. But nevertheless, I support the Me Too movement because it's important because of people like Harvey Weinstein. Because that's what kicks it off. Because there really are men like him in Hollywood, and they can't keep getting away with it. Rah-dally, rah, rah, rah. And that's their justification for witch hunting for treating every man as a potential sex offender. But if it turns out that even Weinstein wasn't as guilty as you're all saying, then you're not even going to have a fucking stump to stand on, are you?
No,
that's just it. I mean, feminism has spent, 50 years, maybe more, teaching women that they have no agency when it comes to setting their own boundaries and dealing with any kind of sexual conduct that doesn't have a cut and dried, this is your script, this is how you behave. Anytime they have to make their own decisions, anytime they have to confront a gray area of, is it ethical for me to do this? Is it ethical for him to do this? Suddenly, they're victims. Even if they made their own choices, even if they had the potential to prevent the situation or demand recourse immediately after the situation, and didn't, they're still suddenly victims. And the fact that women believe that about themselves, the fact that so many women are led down that path, it puts us in this position as a society. Now we're confronting this situation of men who have not deliberately contravened women's choices, men who have not deliberately set out to prevent women from uh, if they had to choose to refuse from being able to, or to contravene that refusal, are still treated as though they have engaged in malicious contravention of those refusals. And they're treated as if they have done something predatory when in fact they're just on the other side of an interaction that the rules of engagement have been destroyed by feminism, and now the other side of that interaction has no agency. So the guy is stuck with he's responsible for everything, and it doesn't do a lot of good for feminists to claim that they are getting rid of gender roles, that they hate gender roles and gender stereotypes, and they're trying to eliminate those when they're not eliminating that set, but instead taking away all of the safety nets that are included with them, and taking away all of the rules that make those gender roles make sense, leaving the gender roles intact, uh, exaggerating them, and then abandoning people basically in terms of support, in terms of social support for fulfilling their side of those gender roles. So now they have nothing. Now they have no guarantee of any kind that there is a course of action that they can engage in that will be viewed as the right way to do things. If he says yes, he's a rapist. If he says no, he's abusive. If he sexually harasses a woman, obviously he's a harasser. If he doesn't sexually harass a woman, and she actually intended for him to flirt and engage with her, suddenly, he's cold and cruel at the office, and that's abusive too. And they've left men with nothing right to do, and they've left women with nothing adult to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically where Me Too really comes from. It's not necessarily about women being victimized. It's not necessarily about men being predators. It's about men and women not having a means of engagement with each other in a professional setting, that takes into consideration, uh, they're mashing heterosexual opposite sexes into the workplace together, and there's going to be, you know, uh, there's going to be interaction, there's going to be chemistry, there's going to be attraction, there's going to be situations where there's no chemistry and there's no attraction, and there's no rules of conduct that give people a clear path as to how to interact in the workplace.
Especially in industries like Hollywood, where the people there are people who are very attractive, and there are people who are also very rich and powerful. So when you have like people with the status and the wealth that Harvey Weinstein has, and you mix that in with young attractive women, inevitably you're going to run into issues with the way that they interact. And I wouldn't even.
Especially when their attractiveness is part of the product.
Yes, exactly, and that's exactly what it is in the entertainment industry. And I'm not even trying to lament that. I actually think that from the beginning, that's what it always was. Harvey Weinstein was a powerful and rich man that was making proposals to attractive women, or maybe women proposed to him because they knew that he was a shortcut to fame and stardom, and they used each other in whatever ways they could, right? Like he used them sexually or whatever, and they used him financially, or they used his pull to shoot them into stardom, and that's mostly what it was. Like, I mean, from the beginning, that's what it was. We knew that, and that's why the Me Too thing stinks a little bit, because we knew that there was consent going on, likely most of the time, even if there was like that recording of him that I don't remember, but I remember that it was one of those things that I think could still have been consensual but we just don't know enough about what it reveals. But I think that in a lot of the cases that are being levied against him, if not most of them, I would say the overwhelming majority, he's probably going to come out shining like a rose if there isn't any biases on the parts of judges and all of the evidence is presented fairly and weighed, because I think that 9 times out of 10 it was consensual. And the problem with that is that he is the main sort of antagonist, the main villain in the Me Too movement. And if it comes out that he's innocent, then in most of those cases, that's actually going to hurt real legitimate cases that may exist, or at least people will feel as though, there's no such thing as justice, especially if they like buy into that consistent victim mentality of, men get away with these things because they're powerful, or because they're men, or because they're white, or whatever. And so this is actually just going to serve to feed back into the narrative if he's found innocent, and they will use it, and people will buy into it because they have been conditioned to see Harvey Weinstein as not just the guilty party, but the most guilty person, the given. And I mean, this is like on the left and the right. Everyone just believes that he did this, and they forgot that this is, probably a consensual thing, because people in general don't hold women to standards of maturity, and people in general see men as predatory. So
I mean, that perception though that it hurts legitimate cases. The thing that hurts legitimate cases the most is the blurring of lines by feminists
yeah,
between illegitimate cases and legitimate cases,
exactly.
where they try to legitimize the illegitimate cases by dragging legitimate ones down. Oh, evidence shouldn't matter. Yeah, it actually really should. Evidence is vital, and we should never put somebody in jail or penalize somebody for an action that is a criminal act on the basis of anything but evidence. Evidence is the most important thing in those terms. Um, the thing that really gets me about this is what's coming out and the people aren't going to realize is how badly, how much of a just foobar mess feminists have made of the issue of boundaries and consent, and the idea of the criminality of uh not overriding. That's not the word I'm trying to think of. Sorry, I've only been up for like an hour before the
It's
show
okay. It's
'cause I
okay.
worked last night. But of basically of contravening somebody's choices, um, overriding, uh, I guess is the best word I can think of at the time, but somebody else's ability to consent or refuse. And before they got a hold of the term and started tweaking what it means and everything, the legal term rape, it wasn't perfectly defined. I mean, it was like carnal knowledge of a woman against her will, which left men out. If a man was victimized, he was SOL in terms of being his victimization being defined the same way. But the phrase against her will is very important. And they've changed from a situation where the criminal's act is deliberate, right? Where the intent has to be there. That against her will is deliberate contravention of her refusal. Whereas they've taken consent and turned it into the idea of like a contract, where instead of sex being a mutually engaged action, that normally the people involved in it are all equally contributing to at least the intent of the action. Even though I think more often than not men do more of the work than the women. Um, I think the understanding of it, like historically, the understanding of it is two people mutually engaged in an action together. That's not a seeker and a consenter. That's two people mutually engaged in an action. It's like a fist fight, only nice. And if you were to treat an assault as if you know there were no rules to that either, somebody mugging somebody on the street, for instance. Anytime you say, "Hey, can I have a buck?" You know, a panhandler comes up to you, "Can I have $1 for a sandwich at McDonald's or something?" And you
Hmm.
give it to them, um, and you didn't say, "Yes, you can have $1." You've just been robbed. You know, that's kind of the equivalent of what they've done
Yeah.
with sexual violence. It's a mutually engaged thing when you engage in sex together. It's a unilaterally engaged thing when somebody commits sexual violence. And the idea that a mutually engaged act can still be a rape because she didn't say the right words, or she wasn't uh, enthusiastic about saying the right words
Yeah.
or engaging in the actions herself, it's ludicrous. So of
Hmm.
course we're going to end up with these situations where uh, people have engaged in a mutual act, and then one of them feels bad about it later, and suddenly they decide they've been victimized. And of course, their partner has no idea that he's supposedly victimized someone because he was engaging with a person who was enthusiastic. You know, and just the act of engaging is enthusiastic in and of itself. And this is going to destroy our ability to relate to each other
Hmm.
as partners, um, as opposite sex partners, if we don't turn it around and pull it back and say no. It is up to both sexes to determine their own boundaries. It's up to both sexes to define their own boundaries, to articulate their own boundaries, and to take responsibility for their own actions. Not just men and women.
Yep. And I think that that breakdown in communication between men and women is, I think it's the point, actually. I think that this ideology has been doing this with our ability to communicate with each other and language for as long as, I mean, as I can, remember that it's been around. And I think this is just another sort of, spoke on that wheel. So it's definitely something that has to be addressed. And we will, I guess we're going to learn some new information come Thursday. So we'll probably do a video if it turns out that that is the case. So be on the lookout for that. But we're going to move on to the next story. All right. This one is from Mike J, but he's not here. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it. Close the border, reset the clock. Vertigo and DC Comics have announced the cancellation of the radically charged comic known as Border Town. Really quickly, we did a video, Breaking Badger, Lindsay and I, about Zoe Quinn's comic called Goddess Mode, and it was part of a new line of Vertigo comics that were all very, very, very social justicey, and Border Town was one of them, and it's one of the worst. I've seen reviews on it; it's really bad. The cancellation comes after the comic's co-creator, Eric M. Esquivel, was accused of sexual abuse by former co-worker Cynthia Noggle. Noggle has made the accusation in a blog spot post and never actually named Esquivel as her abuser, but tacitly implied it was him in later Twitter posts. Once Esquivel was accused, the creative team behind Bordertown, Tamara Bonvillain, that's her name. That's her name. And Ramon Villalobos both stepped down for the project after each one posted virtue signal laden condemnations of Esquivel on Twitter. A day after they stepped down, the comic was confirmed to be canceled by the publishers, with DC specifically issuing a return order for all previous issues. Just an implosion based on this accusation. And yeah, it's one of those things again where a male feminist, a male SJW gets accused of sexual impropriety, sexual assault, outright abuse, whatever, and it ends with him losing his job, the project goes to shit, or something along those lines. So yes, reset the clock, but also I have my suspicions. I still have my questions. So, but there you go. You guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, when you hang out with liars, chances are one of them's going to lie about you eventually. And when you hang out with people who need justification for their own dysfunction, so they project it onto all people with a characteristic in common for them, you're eventually going to be targeted by that dysfunction. So, on one hand, if it's true, well, I don't think that it's unreasonable to suspect, given that male feminists spend a lot of time trying to convince women to be afraid of men and to think men are by nature uh, sexual predators that have to be kept under control by a complex series of rules made up by feminist women. That maybe hanging out with feminist men isn't the safest thing to do, you know. But on the other end of it, feminist women spend a lot of time trying to justify false accusations of intimate partner and sexual violence as a woman's right. And I don't think for a man that hanging out with feminist women is the safest thing to do either. I mean, this is essentially two different breeds of sharks hanging out with each other and being surprised when one side bites the other side occasionally.
Yeah, I got a super chat. I'm gonna go ahead and read it out now. They call me Mags. She gives us 10. He or she gives me $10, or us. They didn't go to me. This goes to HBR. Border Town is hands down the most racist and cartoonishly offensive comic to ever exist, and the thing that cancels it is this. Yeah, I know. That's what it took. I mean, it was really bad, really bad. I don't think it was selling that well. Honestly, it was just too bad. The only thing that was good about it for some is the art. Personally, the art's not to my taste. I'm not really crazy about this style, but that was the only thing that was good. Like the art, the writing was awful. It was just really bad. And, you know, I say this every time, but I think about this a lot. Whenever I see a case where a male feminist or a male SJW loses their job or something happens or they get accused of something by the women in their circle, it's a mixed bag because, you know, on the one hand, sure, you know, there's a bit of Schadenfreude at the idea that someone is who often virtue signals that their political opponents or other men are the ones that are this way, and yet they get accused. But I'm with Hannah on that, you know, but if you run with wolves, you know, you're going to get bit too. And it could be, and I'm, you know, I don't know the truth about this. It seems that someone was saying that Gail Simone, who is another feminist like comic creator that's destroying the industry, knew about this, like knew about the abuse that was supposedly going on and did nothing for whatever reason. Maybe she liked the work that he was doing and thought it was worth it, or because he was making important statements about immigration and race and all that. Or she was just like a moral coward, which I think is also, you know, possible, but she did nothing. So if this was really happening, then it's shitty that this is how it comes out instead of it being handled through the normal channels where you go to the police, you don't make a blog post about it, where you passive aggressively, you know, point the finger and then your friends kind of like insinuate or they infer what you're getting at, and then they go on Twitter and they make that is just the way that fucking 10-year-olds might do it. And even then, I think they'd be more likely to go to their parents or go to some sort of authority figure. If it's not
But remember,
true,
Brian,
yeah.
women have no power and no influence.
True. Yeah, they can't actually get people fired. It must have been one of these people must identify as a dude. But like, it's either that or it's not true. In which case, they just decided to someone decided to start a rumor because they didn't like him, and the other people just sort of bought into it and, you know, acted like they knew. Like, oh yeah, I figured this guy was a creep, and here are my thoughts on that, or whatever. So either way, it's just like when you travel in circles of people who generally have really bad ideas, they may also have really bad behavior that goes with it. So I don't know. It's hard for me to feel really bad, but I don't like to see things that I think are a bit that smell fishy enough that they could be unjust happening, even to people who I disagree with.
If you're a straight white man and you just hand out guns at the door to every woman who goes past and says, "Go get those straight white men, girls." And then how can you be in the least bit surprised when you get fucking shot in the head?
Yeah. This also really goes to show how easy it is for a woman to even just use a rumor, not a proven fact, not a police report, not a criminal charge, just a rumor on a blogspot blog. I have a blogspot blog. Even with everything I do, it barely gets any views. I mean, I don't promote it significantly or anything else, but Blogspot is like this quiet little corner of the internet. It's not something that you get a lot of attention from. So you have this person with this Blogspot blog, and they and nuked her entire workplace basically
Yep.
with a rumor of sexual misconduct, an unproven rumor of sexual. That's all it takes
Yep.
because she's a woman. If it had been the other way around, if the guy had accused the woman, everybody would have been like, they might have read it, they might have thought about it for a minute, and then they'd have walked away from it and they'd have forgot about it, gone off and done something else. But a woman with a rumor like that, all she has to do is float it, and the next thing you know, things start to unravel.
Mm-hmm. And that also brings me to another point. DC Vertigo Comics, stop hiring the emotionally stunted to check boxes. If these people were professional, the book would have been good, it would have sold well, and you wouldn't have had to cancel it because this shit wouldn't have happened. You have to you gotta stop that. Just stop with this fucking virtue signaling bullshit. Get good people on your team to make good content that aren't emotional children with fucking borderline issues, and you'll be fine. Like, you'll actually sell books. I know people who are professional that are having trouble with their jobs because these kinds of people, these emotionally stunted, I don't know, like babies, are actually running the industry. And they're going to run it into the ground, and you're going to lose all your best folks, your most talented people, because you want to check boxes, because you think that virtue signaling is what the kids want. It's not. Nobody wants that. They want good content. We shouldn't be talking. No, look, there shouldn't be an article about how a comic book got canceled because of some behind-the-scenes drama. Comic books should get canceled because they sucked. That's it. Like, nobody bought them. But this is what does it. It's sad. It's just really sad. I feel like this is something that would happen in high school, and it's happening in not just the professional sphere, but in one of the largest companies, the other really big company in the entire industry itself. There are, multi-million-dollar films being made that's based on the same company, and this is the childish shit that happens behind the scenes. Stop it, DC Comics. Stop. Get people that know what they're doing and that actually go to work, not go there to spread rumors and get people fired and fucking act like children on Twitter. It's just, it's pathetic. It's time to stop. All right, that's all I got on that.
It's time to stop.
The other thing I want to point out, because I've been in a workplace where shit like this happens, and when you are on the receiving end of it, you start to get this. Is it? Did I do something wrong? Am I I'm surrounded by drama? Am I the person that's causing it? And it's actually almost like being gaslighted, in that you have this shit coming down on your head, and the drama can actually completely. It's like a brain drain. You're lost. You're intellectually fatigued. You can't really figure out what's going on, and then you get out of the situation and you look back at it, and when you finally get a chance to examine it from outside of that workplace, it blows your mind how bizarre you let things get before you left.
Yeah.
People that end up trapped in these situations because they can't leave their workplace for a period of time. Because I've been in workplaces that I couldn't leave, that I really wanted to leave, I just couldn't afford to. I mean, I could have chosen to let my family become homeless, but uh, in any case, it really does. It can be very destructive to your decision making capability for the time that you're in that situation. And I really do feel sorry for the people involved because of that. Not
Yeah.
the person who was causing all of the drama, but definitely the people that were caught up in it.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, and also, guys, press F for Border Town. Press F to pay respects. It's gone. So I got a couple super chats here. Thank you so much, guys. Let's see. We got. French Honey Badger gives us $2 and says, as Michael Jordan says, stop. Get some help. Thank you. Cyberzerk gives us 50 secs. That's actually how Border Town got into this trouble in the first place, Cyberzerk. So stop that. Due process is the way, always. And starting to call the false accusers what they are: liars, thieves, and parasites who waste tax money. Yes, agree on that. You could also press D for disrespect if you don't want to respect Border Town. I respect your desire to not respect them. Okay, so moving on to the next story. Okay, hold on just a moment here. Because we're going to be talking about DC's new law, or they're proposing a new law. So chill out. We have to do something is the rallying cry of the left after any tragedy that involves a gun. In DC, the city council has put together a set of proposals that would ban bump stocks, but also a person who has a temporary restraining order against them issued in a domestic violence case could have their firearms taken. Currently, a judge cannot order a firearm seizure of firearms until a 14-day temporary restraining order expires and after a hearing in which a more expansive order would be issued. It is only if this more expansive order is issued could firearms be removed. A judge would issue an order to surrender, in which, if an individual does not comply, they would be considered to be in unlawful possession of a firearm. With the new law, a person would not be able to defend themselves in court if they are accused of domestic violence and have a temporary emergency restraining order put against them. Also included in the bill, law enforcement would be allowed to petition the court to remove ammunition and firearms from an individual deemed to be a significant risk to themselves and others. Many other progressive states have or are in the process of implementing these kinds of laws in their states as well.
Just ban guns in DC. Just see what happens. Just do an experiment. Just pick one little place in the USA and ban all the guns there, and see if gun crime goes down in that place. Because you had prohibition of alcohol once, and you all know how that went. So you're gonna have people building guns in their bathtubs. Just try it out.
Well, that's kind of the way things are in Chicago, and Chicago has ended up being kind of a murder capital. So there's your experiment. I mean, it's not all guns banned in Chicago, but it has some of the strictest gun laws, if I understand correctly, in the world. As aside from places that have banned them altogether, um, Chicago has extreme gun laws, and it also has, I think, just about the worst crime rate in the U.S. So yeah, there's your experiment. As far as DC goes, those rules that they're proposing, those exist in a lot of places already. Not the bump stock part, but the you get a restraining order against you for domestic violence, you lose your guns. That started in '94 with the Violence Against Women Act, and a bunch of states passed laws that resulted in gun confiscation on the basis of accusations of domestic violence, which were almost always followed up with temporary emergency restraining orders. And one of the results of that was women who accused partners that are law enforcement. So they have a boyfriend or a husband who is a cop, or who is a detective or a sergeant, whatever. Um, that person ends up losing his job because he's been accused. And even if the accusation turns out to be false, and that through through court and everything, it is determined that he is completely innocent and he is acquitted. His loss of his ability to carry his firearm temporarily costs him a job in which the entity he works for has to replace him. Now, my friend who went through the 7 year, they're not going to replace somebody that's been out for 7 years and then say, well, you can come back and we're going to give this person the shaft that's had this job of yours for 7 years, 7 months even. If it takes 7 months to prove your innocence, likely you've lost your job for good in this type of field. So yeah, this is not just a minor thing. It's not just a thing of, well, but if you prove your innocence, which you shouldn't have to do, they should have to prove your guilt. But if you prove your innocence, you get your guns back. Yeah. Well, what if your job, and in DC, there's quite a few jobs that require people to carry guns. You get a restraining order against you and you lose your carry if you're a armed security guard, if you are a bodyguard, any of those types of jobs, you're going to end up losing your job. So it's really really a lot bigger than people think it is when they say, well, yeah, but you're only losing your firearms for maybe a couple of weeks, and then your restraining order goes away and you get your guns back. Yeah, but do you get your job back?
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. Anybody else have any thoughts on this story or anything else you want to add, Hannah?
Oh, there's a lot of discussion that could be had about this. I mean, the firearm stuff in and of itself, I think I have said over and over again how stupid that is, and Doc made my biggest point on that. Prohibition never works.
Yeah.
Prohibition is the dumbest approach. Education is a great approach. Prohibition is an idiotic approach. And the best way to prevent gun crime is for the people who would commit it to have to fear that anybody that they might attack using a gun could shoot back at them. That is the biggest deterrent that they could possibly face to gun crime, is that the victim might shoot back. But nobody listens. There are people on both sides of the gun issue. And you have, like, I'm all for things like gun safety training. I'm all for licensing. I'm all for ensuring that we aren't being stupid about guns, where we have where we put guns into the hands of people who are demonstrably dangerous and unpredictable. But the idea that your average person isn't smart enough to figure out how to be wise with a firearm and how to be careful and mindful with a firearm is bullshit. But the people who are anti-gun will never listen to that. They are nanny state supporters. They believe in the idea that people aren't smart enough to control their own behavior, and they will never listen to anything that we say with respect to personal accountability where guns are considered.
It's so bizarre that the same sort of leftist social justice warriors who want to protect women and are all about making women equal are the same people who want to ban guns when guns are the great equalizer. They can make a 90-pound woman just as dangerous as a 300-pound man. And yet,
what they said, Sam Colt, or God may have made man, Sam Colt made him equal.
There you go. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
I put Mike back in the room a little while ago when I saw that he came back in.
Got caught outside of the house with my phone. Thought it was only going to be an hour-long trip. Turned out to be 2.5-hour-long trip.
That sucks. Sorry about that. Okay, I got a super chat. Before I read it though, do you guys have any other comments on this story?
I have one super quick. On what Doc said and then one Hannah said. Yes, it is funny how they do talk about trying to prevent women to have guns, and they're all about empowerment and equality and stuff. Why wouldn't you want women to have guns? It's also the same group of people who fervently do not trust the police because they're all racist, they're all bigots, they're all scary homophobes that just go around killing blacks for fun. But you shouldn't have a gun because, well, only cops know what to do with guns.
Yeah. Just like they believe that our president is literally Hitler, so we should give him all of our guns. So, yeah,
and the street's full of rapists. You a 1 in 5 chance of being raped if you're a woman, but don't you dare carry any weapons.
Exactly. All right, so super chat. Barry Bluebird, I think that's a new face. I've never seen Barry Bluebird here before. Asks, were you ever in an abusive relationship? And he's asking all of us. Now, when you say that, do you mean romantic relationship specifically or just any kind of relationship? In which case, my answer either way is yes. That's all I'm going to say about that. So I figure I'll answer. You guys can answer if you want to, but that's my answer. Nobody else wants to answer. Okay.
Well,
so,
yeah, I can answer that, but I'm curious as to Barry Bluebird's motivation there. What's the motive for asking that question? Because having been in an abusive relationship or having not been in an abusive relationship really doesn't have any bearing on the sense and sensibility of these types of laws. I've been in an abusive relationship. I've been on both sides.
yeah.
I've been the abused and I've been the abuser. Like I just to be really blunt about it, I've been horribly abused in my past by both sexes, and I have been a horrible abuser in my past. I've been a horrible person in my past, and I don't think it really has any bearing at all on whether it is it's right to use laws irresponsibly to take away people's rights and freedoms who have done nothing wrong. It doesn't matter how bad an abuser is. It doesn't change that the person who has done nothing wrong has done nothing wrong. And as long as there is one method of abuse that one sex can use unilaterally against the other that involves exploiting the law against them, it's an even worse thing to create a legal standard that allows for them to disarm that person. The 7 Years in Hell story that I keep referring back to, the woman who made the allegations in that story over and over and over again came to her victim's house and threw poisoned sponges and poisoned toys and stuff into the backyard for his kids and his dogs to find. This was not a gutless, not just a gutless liar. She was also a crazy and fearless stalker. So when you have the ability to go in and say, well, yeah, but you can't defend yourself. You can't even have a gun in your home. And you're willing to go to that person's home and invade their property and do insane things. I mean, she went to his sister's house and stabbed his niece's dog. So you got somebody like that, and you give that person the right to take away somebody's self-defense. Are you stopping abuse, or are you enabling an abuser?
All right. And also, just to be clear, when I say I have been in an abusive relationship, it was emotional, and it didn't last for long because I didn't put up with it. So it was brief. Okay, so Cyberzerk gives us 50 secs and says, I would rather want knives legal than guns, less chance to kill an innocent third party. Okay. Well, he is, where are the Kronas? What country is that? Is that like Scandinavia or something?
I think that's Swedish.
Swedish.
Sure.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. Okay, so thank you for the super chat, and we're going to move on to the next story. If you guys would like, continue the conversation in the comments section. I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, so next is a bit of good news. So this American Circumcision is now available on Netflix to watch. American Circumcision explores both sides of the circumcision debate, including the growing int activist movement, which is basically an amalgamation of intact and activist, which believes that all human beings have a right to keep the body they were born with intact. This is the first documentary of its scale to comprehensively explore this cutting-edge issue, no pun intended, which involves sex, politics, and religion, all in the most personal way possible. So if you guys still have Netflix, I don't, but if you do, you can watch American Circumcision now, and I recommend it. Now, I've seen it. I saw most of it. I heard part of it because I was working the sales booth area. When I was at the ICMI last year, it is tough to watch. It's tough.
Yeah, I would recommend hearing it without watching it. It's trying to watch it is it's pretty dark.
Yeah,
you know,
it's dark.
It's got some medical images and yeah. You gotta see it because you gotta see the consequences of this shit. But
yeah, it's even harder if you're a parent. I will say that.
Yes, but I do recommend you guys check it out if you're curious about the circumcision debate. If you always thought, why is this a big deal, and you wondered why the circumcision discussion was important, I highly recommend you watch this. Xeranx just gave us $2, so we should be here to chiming soon. He says, after I watch this, I'll watch the Red Pill. Thank you, Xeranx. Yeah, definitely watch the Red Pill too. It was actually this event, circumcision, which Cassie J looked into. I bet that was one of the things that really put her on the path to discussing men's issues. It was if circumcision doesn't do it, I don't know that anything could. So. Definitely check it out, and I think it's a very good documentary. Available now. So, all right. Moving on to that was basically it for that. So moving on to the last story, we're gonna go with something a little lighter, and I think this is Mike J's covering this one. So we're gonna talk a little about taxes on video games. That's right. We're gonna be taxing video games. All right, Mike, it's all yours.
I couldn't find this for the life of me, but there was this great little meme I saw to accompany this. It had just like a picture of like some gamer, like I think it was AVGN already or something like that. And it had this headline, you know, the proposes tax on video games, and you just see him slowly morph into like Ron Paul.
That's fucking great. Yeah, I like that.
Saved it.
It's great stuff.
Anywho. Pennsylvania House of Representatives member Christopher B. Quinn has proposed a 10% tax on mature and adults-only rated video games. The tax is part of House Bill 2705 and has a mix of both Republican and Democratic co-sponsors. So they're working in tandem on this one.
Finally, they agree on something. Video games bad. Go ahead.
But it's one of the few things that like the progressive left and the
conservative
very,
right,
sort of authoritarian conservative right can agree on, and that's no fun allowed.
And it just happens to be something with a mostly male audience.
Yeah,
no fun allowed for all those men. See.
Anyway, in Quinn's memo attached to the bill, he states the money raised would go to, quote, the purpose of enhancing school safety measures implemented by school districts as provided by the laws of this Commonwealth. Quinn further explains his reasoning for the necessity of this tax, stating, quote, over the past few years, acts of violence in schools seem to be occurring more frequently and with more intensity. From Colorado to Connecticut to most recently in Parkland, Florida, students have experienced unthinkable actions by peers in a place that should promote learning and enrichment, safety, and protection. Yeah, so Quinn then wraps up the memo by quoting a study from the National Center for Health Research, which cites video games as one factor. I want to highlight that. One factor in the increase in school shootings. The media coalition...
Maybe we should put a tax on Catcher in the Rye, because that dude killed John Lennon.
Yeah, that was one factor in the killing of John Lennon.
A tax on any book that might have influenced someone to commit any act of violence. Or just a tax on adult books, including 50 Shades of Grey? No?
Oh!
I want to know when they're going to put a tax on single motherhood, because that's a more common factor in school shootings than anything to do with video games.
Ooh, shots fired, Hannah.
Pshaw, pshaw. Single mothers are goddesses. Queens! Don't you respect
is
women?
Kali.
Nobody respects women anymore. Go ahead, Hannah. I'm sorry.
No, that was just my point. So is Kali.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Mike.
So, the Media Coalition, a group seeking to protect First Amendment rights, has come out against this bill. In a memo published to their website, they state, quote, "We believe that the proposed legislation to impose a 10% sales tax on video games with violent content is clearly an unconstitutional content-based punishment on speech. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that video games are fully protected by the First Amendment. The court held that video games are entitled to the full constitutional protection, the same as books, newspapers, movies, or music." The Media Coalition also quoted the late Justice Scalia, who said in a ruling, like the protected books, plays, and movies that preceded them, video games communicate ideas and even social messages. Through many familiar literary devices such as characters, dialogue, plot, and music, and through features distinctive to the medium, such as the player's interaction with the virtual world, that suffices to confer First Amendment protection.
Okay. Well,
I didn't always agree with Scalia or his rulings, but I always thought that one, which I believe like it was Brown versus the Software Association or something like that. I thought he was really bang on in that one.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. So it's just a bill, guys. It hasn't passed yet, but go ahead, Hannah. Just reminding people.
The Violence Against Women Act was just a bill once. I'm going to bang on this drum after I brought it up, because this is a free speech issue, yes, but it's not just a free speech issue. It is a congressional dishonesty issue, and it's not just federal Congress; it's your state Congresses, and this even can go down to your county and city government. This is a really neat trick. First, you demonize a thing. Oh, this thing is horrible. People who use this thing or engage with this thing experience dysfunction X. Dysfunction X happens with these people. Now, we're not going to try to prove that it's unique to people who use this thing or experience this thing. It's just dysfunction X. We see an association with dysfunction X and this thing. Even if it, exists independently of this thing sometimes also, we're going to ignore that. We're just going to make this association with dysfunction X and this thing. And our way of discouraging people from overdoing this thing to the degree that we are going to claim dysfunction X is associated with it. Like, well, we can't necessarily prove that reducing your use of this thing reduces dysfunction X. Yeah, we don't have to do that. But we're going to tax it to discourage you from overdoing this thing. And this thing it doesn't matter what this thing is. This thing can be guns. This thing can be smoking. This thing can be drinking. This thing can be going to the wrong kind of movies. Now it's video games. But what it really is we wanted another avenue of taxation. So we're going to demonize this thing as being associated with dysfunction X. And we're going to profit from that demonization, whether it's true or not. We're going to profit. We're going to become your drug dealer. We're going to become your porn dealer. We're going to become your video game dealer now. You have to pay the government for using this thing that the government has said has a correlation or association with dysfunction X. And if they really gave a shit, an actual shit about the violence that is happening in schools today, they would take a long, hard look at how readily and easily our government participates in the breakdown of the family unit. And the fact that kids are being denied relationships with their fathers is a much bigger factor in that dysfunction. So if they really wanted to stop school violence, they would start coming out and supporting equally shared parenting rights and methods to stop incentivizing divorce and stop incentivizing women choosing to become unwed mothers in the first place.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it doesn't go through because I know a lot of people want to get their hands on the new Soldier Boy console that's coming out. No, they
Well,
don't.
the good news is there's a lot of legislation on the books that they can already point at to go, we've already had this discussion, we've already had this debate, and the answer is no. You have literally nothing backing you up. Stay the hell away from our video games.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully, because if they don't and this happens, it's just gonna open the floodgates to tax a bunch of other shit based on the same criteria, right? It's too dangerous a precedent to set. Everyone get out of Pennsylvania now. If the tax goes through, leave. Get out. Stop buying anything.
Why don't you start with mobile games? Tax mobile games just to see what happens there.
Oh, but wait.
Because then you'll have a very high pitched screech from the audience. It
Well,
won't
hell,
like what happens then.
if you're in Pennsylvania, write to your legislator and say, we know that you don't have an actual reason to do this and you're just creating a tax to create a tax. It's completely transparent. You're not fooling anyone, and we're going to remember it at the polls. That's what they need to hear.
Mm-hmm. Definitely complain. And I know we got at least one viewer that lives in Pennsylvania, I believe. So, you know who you are. All right. Anybody else have any other thoughts? I think actually we are just about done. Okay, I have a super chat from Zeranx. He says, "Oi, have you paid your taxes for that game? Damn it, wrong country."
I haven't got my tax license. So I can't pay taxes.
Yeah, you need your tax license to pay your taxes. Crazy. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get out of here and go into the after show then. So we did well. It's 6:07. We did it in just over an hour. That was surprisingly fast. Where we're going to be looking at this Medium blog entitled "What We Learned About Diversity and Inclusion in 2018." I don't know what's going to be in it. It's always a surprise. I just go by the headline, and most of the time it turns out to be a pretty cringeworthy bit. So if you want to be a part of that, go to Feed the Badger, not Patreon. Go to feedthebadger.com and choose a setup that is appropriate for what you are able to do for us. And then you can join us in the after show. I hope that we get more people to do that because we aren't getting as many, let's say, signups on our Feed the Badger as we have lost people through Patreon. And I get that you guys left Patreon. Those of you who left Patreon did so on principle. I get it. I appreciate that. But if you don't go to Feed the Badger, it doesn't help us very much. So if you want to help us, please go to feedthebadger.com and make a pledge, make a donation. However you want to set it up. I'm sure Alison's got it all set up, and she's had this implemented in advance just in case something like this were to happen. So anyway, go to feedthebadger.com. Also, if you're not already subbed to this channel, Badger Live Streams, please sub to Badger Live Streams. It really helps us out. Hit that like button as well so that we get more exposure. It does well for us. More people see the stream, more people join the stream. And if they like it, then they sub to us. And if they don't, then they make an argument against us. And I like seeing those too. So do that. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and get us out of here because I'm feeling super awkward for some reason. I don't know why. It's because here's the thing. Last week I had to get my CT scans, and I still have this like really weird feeling from the they give you this dye that they inject you with through an IV, and it gives me a full body rash every time, and I'm still dealing with that. But there's also some side effects too, so this is why I'm feeling a little bit weird lately. But there it is. TMI for you guys. TMI, full body rash. Next week, there won't be a new show because it is the holiday. We'll be back after New Year's. So until next time, you guys have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. And we'll see you guys in 2019. Thank you, Hannah, Mike, and Mike. And thank you guys for watching. And we'll talk to you guys very soon.